The year is 1942. Deep behind the Ural Mountains, far from the reach of German bombers, the deafening roar of industrial might is the new beating heart of the Soviet war machine. Factories, evacuated and rebuilt in record time, hum day and night with a single furious purpose: producing the tools of war. And the most iconic tool rolling off these assembly lines by the thousands every single day is the PPSh-41. With its signature drum magazine and brutish, simple design, it has already become the Automat Pobedy, the gun of victory. It is the sound of the Red Army's counterattack, a symbol of a nation's unbreakable will, flooding the front lines in a tidal wave of stamped steel and automatic fire. But this victory has a price, a cost measured not just in bullets, but in resources. Every single PPSh-41 requires a heavy, solid wood stock, a significant amount of steel, and, crucially, hours of machining time on complex milling equipment. It is a weapon designed for a nation with a continent's worth of resources to draw upon. Now, let us leave the thundering factories of the Urals and travel to a place where that price was an impossible luxury. A place of silence, starvation, and ice. The city of Leningrad. By 1942, Leningrad is a frozen hellscape, a city of ghosts encircled by the German Army Group North for over a year. The road of life across the frozen surface of Lake Ladoga is a fragile, treacherous artery, a frozen trickle of hope that cannot possibly sustain a metropolis of millions. Here there are no vast reserves of raw materials. There is no surplus of skilled labor. There is no reliable electricity to power the great industrial plants that now stand as frozen, silent tombs. For the defenders of Leningrad, the PPSh-41, the gun of victory, was a weapon from another universe. The wood for its stock was fuel to keep a starving family from freezing to death. The steel for its receiver was a precious resource worth more than gold. The time and machinery required to build one were simply non-existent. The city, a front line in itself, was being bled dry, and it desperately needed a weapon born of its own horrifying reality. It needed a submachine gun that could be hammered together in a frozen workshop by the skeletal hands of a starving engineer, using little more than scrap metal and the unyielding iron of defiance. It needed a weapon not of grand victory, but of pure, desperate survival. Part 2. A genius trapped in the ring of steel. In the spring of 1942, against the grim backdrop of mass starvation and constant artillery bombardment, an event took place in Leningrad that defies all logic. An act of pure, audacious hope. The political and military leadership of the besieged city, desperate for a weapon they could actually produce, announced a formal design competition for a new submachine gun. This was not a competition held in pristine design bureaus with unlimited resources. This was a contest conducted by ghosts in a dying city. Engineers, gaunt and skeletal from malnutrition, sketched designs by the flickering light of oil lamps in the basements of bombed-out hospitals. The creative fire a stark contrast to the mortal cold that was claiming thousands of lives each day. From this crucible of desperation, a winner emerged. It was not a celebrated, high-ranking weapons designer. It was a young, largely unknown army technician named Alexei Sudayev, who finalized some of his groundbreaking designs while recovering from wounds in a hospital bed. Sudayev's prototype was not an evolution of the PPSh-41. It was a complete and total revolution in the philosophy of wartime manufacturing. He was not just designing a gun, he was designing a weaponized solution to the specific hellish problems of the Leningrad Blockade. His approach was one of brutal, uncompromising pragmatism. His first principle was the total and utter dominance of sheet metal stamping. While the PPSh was a pioneer in using stamped parts, it still relied on a heavy machined bolt and other critical milled components. Sudayev's design, which would become the PPS-43, was a symphony of the press. The receiver and the perforated barrel shroud were not a complex single unit, but two simple clamshell-like halves stamped from flat 1.5 mm steel sheets, then riveted and welded together. This meant the core of the weapon could be produced on the most basic stamping and pressing equipment, the kind that might have been making pots and pans before the war. The results of this philosophy were nothing short of miraculous, and they can be measured in the stark, beautiful arithmetic of survival. To produce a single PPSh-41 required 13.5 kilograms, nearly 30 pounds, of raw steel, and took 7.3 man-hours of labor. Sudayev's design required less than half the metal, just 6.2 kilograms, 13.7 pounds, and could be assembled in a mere 2.7 man-hours. In the context of the blockade, these were not just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were life and death. The metal saved on one PPS could be used to make another. The hours saved were hours a starving worker could rest. This was a weapon that gave back more than it took. Furthermore, Sudayev completely eliminated wood from the design. In a city where wooden floorboards and furniture were being burned as the last desperate source of fuel to keep families from freezing, a solid wood stock like the one on the PPSh was an unthinkable luxury. Sudayev's solution was a simple, starkly utilitarian folding stock made from stamped steel strips. It was not elegant, nor was it particularly comfortable, but it was incredibly effective. It made the weapon compact, and most importantly, it was a component that could be made from the same scrap steel as the rest of the gun. This single design choice was a perfect reflection of the gun's soul. It was a weapon that understood its environment, a masterpiece of engineering born not in a lab, but forged in the very heart of the apocalypse. Part 3. Anatomy of Survival. To dismiss the PPS-43 as merely a cheap or crude weapon is to fundamentally misunderstand the nature of its design. It was not crude. It was ruthlessly efficient. Alexei Sudayev's genius was not just in making a gun that was easy to produce, but in embedding intelligent, high-performance features into that simple design. Every angle, every component was a masterclass in achieving maximum effect with minimum resources. It was a weapon where simplicity and sophistication were one and the same, a testament to the idea that the most elegant solution is often the most direct. The core of its intelligent design was the way the receiver and barrel shroud were integrated. Unlike the PPSh, where the barrel was pressed into a separate heavy trunnion inside the receiver, the PPS design was a marvel of minimalism. The entire upper portion of the weapon was a single, stamped and folded piece of steel. This single design choice eliminated numerous complex parts and machining operations, drastically reducing the points of potential failure and streamlining the assembly process. The weapon could be unfolded on a hinge pin just forward of the magazine well, allowing instant access to the bolt and recoil spring for cleaning and maintenance. A feature that made it incredibly easy for a conscript soldier to care for in the filth of a trench. One of the most significant and often overlooked advantages of the PPS over its predecessor was its dramatically slower rate of fire. The PPSh-41, with its heavy bolt and powerful recoil spring, had a blistering cyclic rate of nearly 1,000 rounds per minute. This made it a terrifying weapon at point-blank range, but also a logistical nightmare that was difficult to control and wasteful of ammunition. Sudayev deliberately engineered the PPS to have a much longer bolt travel distance within the receiver. This simple mechanical trick acted as a natural brake, slowing the cyclic rate down to a much more sedate and controllable 600 rounds per minute. The benefits were immediate and profound. The weapon became significantly more stable and accurate during automatic fire, as the shooter had more time to recover from recoil between shots. It also conserved precious ammunition, a factor of critical importance for an army where supply lines were a constant struggle, and especially for isolated units like partisans or reconnaissance teams operating behind enemy lines. To further aid in its controllability, Sudayev incorporated a brilliantly simple muzzle brake and compensator. It wasn't a complex, machined device. It was simply the forwardmost portion of the stamped barrel shroud bent into a baffle that deflected propellant gases upwards and sideways. This elementary feature effectively countered the natural tendency of the barrel to climb during firing, keeping the weapon on target. He also completely abandoned the heavy, complex, and often unreliable drum magazine of the PPSh. Instead, Sudayev designed a simple, lightweight, and exceptionally reliable 35-round double-stack, double-feed box magazine. It was a direct lesson learned from the front lines, a pragmatic choice that prioritized flawless function over theoretical capacity. Every feature of the PPS-43, from its hinged receiver to its sedate rate of fire, was a deliberate, intelligent choice, proving that true genius is not about adding complexity, but about removing everything that is not absolutely essential. Part 4. The Specialist's Weapon. The first crudely assembled production runs of the PPS began in the spring and summer of 1942, literally forged in the fires of the besieged city. Workers in the Sestroretsk tool factory, often subsisting on starvation rations of bread made with sawdust, hammered, pressed, and welded the new weapons together. The Leningrad assault rifle, as it was sometimes called, was not shipped thousands of miles to the front. It was born there. As the weapons were completed, they were immediately handed to the desperate soldiers and sailors of the Leningrad front, men who were literally defending the factory walls. The effect was immediate. Soldiers fell in love with the new weapon. It was significantly lighter than the PPSh, a crucial factor for a soldier weakened by malnutrition. Its folded stock made it incredibly compact, perfect for maneuvering through the rubble of urban warfare or the confines of a trench. Most importantly, its controllable rate of fire and inherent reliability gave them a newfound confidence in the brutal close-quarters combat that defined the siege. This raises a critical and fascinating question. If the PPS-43 was, in many respects, a superior weapon to the PPSh-41, lighter, more controllable, more accurate, and vastly cheaper to produce, why did it not completely replace it? The answer is a classic lesson in the brutal logic of wartime economics. By the time the PPS was perfected and ready for mass production on a national scale in mid-1943, the Soviet war machine was a roaring, unstoppable engine. The massive industrial complexes beyond the Urals had been completely retooled and optimized for one single purpose: to churn out the PPSh-41. Supply chains for its specific parts were established, workers were trained in its assembly, and production quotas were being met and exceeded. To halt this finely tuned industrial behemoth and retool the entire system for a new weapon, even a better one, would have caused a catastrophic, months-long disruption in the flow of arms to the front. It was a risk the Soviet High Command, locked in the death struggle of the Kursk salient and the push towards the Dnieper River, was simply unwilling to take. The good enough weapon being produced by the millions was strategically more valuable than the better weapon that would require a massive industrial pause. As a result, the PPS-43 never became the universal weapon of the Red Army. Instead, it became a specialist's tool. While the PPSh remained the workhorse of the common infantryman, the PPS was preferentially issued to units where its unique characteristics offered the greatest advantage. Its compactness and light weight made it the perfect weapon for soldiers for whom the submachine gun was a personal defense weapon, not a primary arm. It was issued to tank crews, who needed a powerful weapon they could fire from the vision slits of a T-34 and easily stow inside the cramped hull. It was given to reconnaissance patrols and forward artillery observers who valued its portability during long treks into enemy territory. Most of all, it became the weapon of choice for elite paratroopers and partisan units operating deep behind enemy lines. For these fighters, who were resupplied infrequently and had to carry everything on their backs, the lighter gun and the more efficient use of ammunition were not just a convenience. They were a lifeline. Part 5. The verdict. The unrecognized masterpiece. So, where does history place the PPS-43 in the pantheon of great firearms? Many military historians and firearms experts have argued with considerable justification that it was the single best submachine gun of the Second World War. This is a bold claim in a conflict that saw titans like the American Thompson, the German MP-40, and its own Soviet sibling, the PPSh-41. While other designs may have been superior in one specific category, the Thompson had more raw stopping power. The MP-40 was perhaps more refined. No other weapon achieved such a perfect, sublime balance of all the critical attributes. When you weigh its combat effectiveness, its exceptional controllability, its rock-solid reliability, and most importantly, the sheer genius of its production-focused design, the PPS-43 stands in a class of its own. It was not just a gun. It was a holistic solution to a brutal existential problem. It was the ultimate expression of battlefield pragmatism, an elegant design forged for the most inelegant of circumstances. The true measure of its success, however, is not found in its relatively limited production run during the war, but in its vast and enduring legacy after. The simple, robust, and brilliantly effective design of the PPS-43 became a blueprint for an entire generation of post-war submachine guns. Its DNA can be found in weapons across the globe, especially those designed for nations needing to arm themselves quickly and cheaply. The Spanish adopted a near clone, the DUX M53. The Finns, who had inadvertently inspired the need for such a weapon, created their own version, the M/44. Hungary produced the K53. Unauthorized copies and direct descendants appeared in Poland, West Germany, China, North Korea, and Vietnam. The PPS-43 became the unofficial gold standard for any nation that needed a simple, reliable, and effective submachine gun that could be produced with a minimal industrial base. Its design philosophy echoed through the Cold War, a quiet testament to its inherent perfection. This global legacy makes the fate of its creator all the more tragic. Alexei Sudayev, the young genius who conceived a masterpiece in the depths of hell, never lived to see the full impact of his creation. His health, likely broken by the unimaginable hardships of the Siege of Leningrad, failed him, He died in August 1946, just a week after his 34th birthday. He passed into history before he could see his Leningrad assault rifle become a global icon, a weapon that would continue to serve and be copied for another half-century. The PPS-43 is therefore more than just a remarkable piece of military hardware. It is a monument to the resilience of the human spirit, a testament to the idea that true genius can flourish even in the most inhuman conditions imaginable. It is the story of an unrecognized masterpiece, a weapon born of starvation and ice that proved to be damn near perfect.